Open up your sky file if you haven't yet. So you should have the eye, the grass, and the sky graphic symbols. And so now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to try to make a bicycle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this layer and I'll call this background, because that's going to be like where our sky and our grass is. And then what I'll do is I'll create a new layer. So one of the things about animate, and we mentioned this earlier, is sometimes it's easier to create things on different layers, and it allows you to have separate animations. Like you could have one eye open and one eye closed if they were on different layers. And so we're going to make our bicycle on different layers only so that it makes your life easier as you're trying to create, and maybe you don't get your circle just right size, and if you need to erase things you don't eat out another little hole or something. So let's go ahead and we'll just call this layer wheel. We'll call it wheel 1. And so let's get an oval, and then on your click on your fill bucket. Oops, what's going on here? I'm going to close my history. I'm going to get my wheel, and I want like a black. I'll get a black wheel, and maybe I don't want a solid black. Maybe I want it just a little bit lighter than that, and so maybe I'll make it about like that. And I'm not going to have a stroke. So let's go back over to the properties panel, and I think I'll keep my stroke at about a 4 so that I have thicker wheels, and maybe even 5. Okay, I'm going to experiment here for a second, and Control Z, and I want my stroke to be that color, and I don't want to fill because so let me animate. I have it the other way, so I'm just going to experiment. Okay. So I'm going to say let's go to a 6 for our, and make a little bit thicker bike. So first we're going to create the wheels, and I called this one wheel 1, and it really doesn't matter where you draw it because we're going to turn it into a symbol. So let's have a wheel about like that. And now I need to draw another wheel. So what I'm going to do is press my selection tool, or the letter V, the shortcut, and I'm going to drag a selection around it. And remember, we're going to hold down the Alt key on the keyboard, and I'm going to drag. Okay, and notice you see this line, right? And so far I think I'm going to say it's going to be about that distance apart. I'm not sure. Now, just because I'm going to have to draw a rectangle between these two, I think what I'm going to do is create a new, I'm going to put a selection around this, and I'm going to go up to the Edit menu, Cut. And now let's create a new layer. I'm going to double click here, and we'll call this Wheel 2. Now I want that wheel in the exact same spot that I had it before. So let's go up to the Edit menu, Paste in Place. So see, it's in the exact same spot, it's just on its own layer. Create another new layer, so we're coming down here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock my 2 wheels so that there's no question that I am going to do something I shouldn't with those. So I'm going to experiment, and what I need to do is I need to draw a rectangle. Oops, I forgot to choose my rectangle tool. Let's click on here, and we're using the same settings. So I'm going to draw a rectangle, and I might have to shorten it, and I might not. And then I want to change the perspective of it. So let's go ahead and click on our free transform, and then, whoops, here, I don't want the free transform, I want my selection tool. And I'm going to double click and select it. Let's see. The next thing I'm going to do is I need to draw a rectangle. So I'm going to put it on its own layer here. And I'm going to, let's call this rectangle. And let's just go ahead. We're going to grab our rectangle tool, use the same settings, and I'm going to draw a rectangle. Now, I need to change the perspective of it, so I'm going to click over here on my free transform tool, and let's just click on the frame 1 here, and that selects the whole rectangle. So all I did was click into the rectangle layer to frame 1, and that selected the whole thing. Now, if you'll notice carefully, if I move my mouse, and here, let's just zoom in a little bit. If I move my mouse, you can see where I get a different type of cursor. And this is going to allow me to click. I'm clicking down and I'm dragging. And this is going to allow me to get a perspective. And now I'm going to click out. And then I'm going to zoom back out. And I think it is a little bit big for my bike, so I'll click on my selection tool. And I will click on the rectangle, and you can click down here too. And let's change the perspective, or let's just free transform it. Hold down your shift key, and let's just make it a little bit smaller. And maybe I want to make it a little bit smaller this way too. So we'll have to play with it because I'm not much of a drawer. Okay, so now I've got this, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the line tool. So here's the line tool. And remember when we talked about the round and the no rounds lines? We want a round line. So let's click the cap and the join to make sure we've got round lines. And let's Control plus. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get down here in the middle of the my wheel, and I'm going to draw a line. And I think I need to move my wheel to, I'll unlock it, because I think I need to move it. Click on my selection tool. And I think I need to move it just a little bit. It should be more like this. Okay. So now I've got my rectangle, and then I'm going to create another new layer, and I'm going to get my line tool again using the same settings, and I'm going to drag and draw and then I'm going to draw the bike handle about like that. And then I'll go ahead and I will draw my pedals. So I think I'll get a line that's about like this. I'll come over this way, and then I'll go to the top, and I think I'll go that way. And then I'm going to draw another line. And then I'm going to, because I'm going to put a seat on top of this, and I'm not sure about how I'm going to draw the seat, I'm going to click on the new layer. And I always do these kind of things, and I'm going to name it seat. If I'm really not quite sure, that way I've got a way to move things around and not mess up what I've already drawn. So I think I'm going to take a rectangle, oops, Control Z, and I need a fill. So let's go ahead, I'll use that same color. So I'm going to take a rectangle, and remember I have round edges because I had that rectangle for round. And then I think what I will do is I'm going to select it, oops, Control Z, get my selection tool, and I'm going to select it. And oops. I think what I'm going to do is get the backward L, and I'm just going to drag in a little bit to make like a seat. Kind of like that. So I have my selection tool, and then what I'm going to do is highlight it all, and then I'm going to move it on. Now the thing is, see, I'm not really sure why I wanted that, but because it's on its own layer, I'm not going to eat that other line that I drew. And so I'm going to try to position this a little bit. And I don't know, you guys will have to tell me. It's like it's backwards, I think. Maybe like that. There we go. And that's our bike. So now let's go ahead and go. I'm going back. And same thing. Let's say I want this bike to be a symbol. So I'm going to highlight it all. Well, let's do it this way first. Let's get all the layers together. And we'll go to Control X cut. Oops, Control Z. So let's highlight everything. So we'll go to frame 1. Let's just highlight everything except for the first wheel, which is that first wheel. So we've selected everything, and it'll go up to the Edit menu, Cut, and let's go over on the wheel, and it will be Edit, Paste in Place. So it's still there, it's just the fact that now it's on its own layer. And if you'll notice, look at all these layer ones where we had the seat, the rectangle, and so forth. See, they're empty. That means there's nothing on that layer. So we can right-click and delete the layer. And I'm going to highlight both of those, delete layers. And so now I'm left with wheel 1, wheel 2. Let's hide this and let's just see what happened. Yeah, everything's on there. And that's okay. We could even make it all a symbol too. It doesn't matter. Okay, so now we have our bike. And we're going to click on our background and then lock our bike. And let's go ahead and bring back our, let's go to our library panel. We're going to bring back our sky. So we're going to drag. And since it's below our bike, that means it's going to be it'll be behind our bike. So let's get our free transform tool. And of course, remember, we needed to rotate. Oops. And then we're going to drag it out. Okay, and then we're going to scroll here so we can make sure we've got our entire stage, and we're getting our entire stage. And I didn't really rotate evenly. And then we'll click on our selection tool. Now let's go ahead and we're going to click on our grass. And oops, maybe I want to put my grass on a different layer. And I'll click and I'll drag my grass. Sometimes, like I said, it's easier to put things on different layers, then you have less hassles. Okay? And then we can call this layer grass. So then if we want to see what it's looking like for real, we've got two ways. Control Enter, and that's what it really looks like if we were to put it on a website. Or we can go Control Test Movie, or Control Test. That's Test Movie if we had some, and we can tested in our browser. So you go to Google Chrome or Internet Explorer, and there it is. So now let's go ahead and call this file, save as, and let's just call this one bike. And let's